The scent of old paper and dust, a peculiar mix, clung to her. It wasn't the usual lavender or that expensive vanilla she favored, the one I bought her last Christmas. This was something different, something foreign, like the musty attic of a house long uninhabited. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it gnawed at me, a persistent whisper at the back of my mind. My name? It hardly matters right now. Let's just say I'm a man who builds, who designs, who sees the intricate blueprints of things before they even exist. And right now, the very blueprint of my carefully constructed life felt compromised. She'd just returned from her parents' place, a quaint, forgotten house nestled deep in the Catskills, a place she rarely visited, a place that held more shadows and memories. Just helping Mom sort through some old boxes, she'd said, her voice a little too light, a little too quick, almost an overcorrection. But the boxes, I knew, were long gone, cleared out years ago when her father passed. What the heck was truly in those boxes? And why did her eyes, usually so clear and open, now hold a flicker of something I couldn't quite place? A shadow, perhaps, or a memory she was desperately trying to outrun. I watched her across the polished granite kitchen island. Sunlight catching the dust motes dancing in the air, a silent ballet of forgotten particles. She was humming. A tune I didn't recognize, and her fingers, usually so still and graceful when she was focused, tapped a nervous rhythm on her ceramic coffee cup. It was a faint tremor, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But I saw it. I always saw the small tells. A tremor that spoke of secrets, of something deeply unsettling. Was it just the stress of visiting her difficult family? Or was it something far more insidious? Something she was actively trying to conceal? I'd built my entire career on understanding complex structures, on dissecting problems, on seeing the unseen flaws that could bring an entire edifice crashing down. And now, the very foundation of my own world felt like it was subtly shifting beneath my feet, cracking under an unknown pressure. The silence between us, once comfortable and reassuring, now hummed with an unspoken question. A question that felt too heavy to voice, too fragile to ignore. She'd been different since the trip, not just the scent. Her phone was always face down. Her laughter, once free and easy, now seemed a little forced, a little brittle around the edges. She'd started taking long walks alone, something she never did, always preferring my company. And the nightmares. Short, sharp gasps in the dead of night, followed by a tense silence where she would pretend to be asleep, rigid beside me. Was this the burden of a secret, or merely the weight of something she couldn't articulate? Did she even realize how much she had changed, how much the quiet rhythm of our life together had been disrupted? A heavy, unspoken weight settled in the air, thick and suffocating. Later that evening, after she'd finally drifted off, claiming exhaustion, I felt a pull, an almost magnetic urge to investigate. While she was deep in sleep, her breathing even but shallow, I found it, tucked deep inside her travel bag, which she left carelessly on the floor of the closet. Beneath a pile of neatly folded clothes that smelled faintly of the old house, that peculiar scent again, was a small, tarnished silver locket. It definitely wasn't hers. I'd never seen it before, and she preferred gold. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, echoing the erratic rhythm of my thoughts. This was a violation, I knew, but a necessary one. This felt like the moment the architect finds the unexpected crack in the load-bearing wall. As I pried it open with a trembling thumb, my breath hitched. Inside, a faded, sepia-toned photograph of a man I knew, a man who, according to everything I believe, had died 20 years ago in a horrific car accident. My hand trembled, the locket suddenly heavy, a lead weight in my palm, a cold stone of dread. What the heck was this? Was this some cruel joke, some elaborate, twisted prank being played on me? Or was it a ghost, returned not just to haunt her, but to utterly shatter the quiet life we had built together? The air in the room seemed to grow colder, and a chill snaked up my spine, a terrifying premonition that this was only the beginning. The cold metal of the locket felt like a branding iron against my skin, searing through the shock. My mind, usually a fortress of logic, reeled. That face, Mark Sullivan, the man everyone, including me, believed had died in a fiery pileup 2 decades ago, just weeks before my wife and I met. Was this some grotesque error? A cruel doppelganger? Or had I been living a lie, meticulously crafted for half my adult life? The room was utterly silent now, save for the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sigh of traffic on the freeway. Each tick of the antique grandfather clock downstairs seemed to echo the frantic thudding in my chest, a relentless countdown to an unknown truth. I stared at the faded photo, the edges curled with age. He looked younger, vibrant, his smile a little crooked, just as I remembered. But why was his picture in her locket, hidden away like a forbidden relic? My wife, who swore she put her past entirely behind her, who rarely spoke of her life before me, certainly not of ex-boyfriends. She'd always painted him as a tragic, fleeting memory, a ghost she'd barely known. Now he was here, tangible proof of a lie, or at least a monumental omission. Was the betrayal merely sexual, a messy affair? Or was this something far deeper, a re-engagement with a past that never truly died, a past that had been deliberately buried? It felt like the earth beneath our house had just shifted, revealing a forgotten, sinister basement. My architectural brain, trained to identify structural weaknesses, immediately began to analyze. This wasn't a casual fling souvenir. This was a secret, carefully guarded, from a significant time. Why lie about something so fundamental? What else had been concealed? I ran my thumb over the Locket's intricate engraving, the tiny, almost illegible initials, MS plus ER. Emily, her maiden initials. A knot tightened in my gut. This wasn't just a locket. It was a time capsule, ejected from a buried history straight into my present. My initial surge of anger, hot and visceral, quickly gave way to a chilling, analytical calm. Confrontation? Lame. It would only yield denials, tears, and a conveniently crafted narrative. I needed facts, hard data, an undeniable blueprint of the truth. The memory of the car accident flashed in my mind. A crumpled wreck, news reports of no survivors. But what if no survivors wasn't entirely accurate? Medical error? A botched identification? Or something more deliberate? A quiet, vanishing act orchestrated for reasons I couldn't yet fathom? The thought sent a jolt through me. Could someone fake their own death and then reappear 2 decades later? It sounded like a B-movie plot, not the quiet, suburban reality I inhabited. Yet, here was the physical evidence. The texture of the faded photo, the unmistakable face, the subtle scent of the old house on her clothes, now imbued with a new, unsettling meaning. It wasn't just dust. It was the smell of forgotten secrets, of decaying truths. I slipped the locket back into her bag, exactly where I found it. No trace. This was going to be a cold war, fought on my terms, with information as my weapon. She thought she was being subtle? Bless her heart. I had access to resources she couldn't even imagine. Corporate databases, public records, even a few contacts in the shady world of digital forensics from that messy patent dispute last year. I could pull up old police reports, medical files, even dig through digital archives of local newspapers from that era. The digital age leaves traces, breadcrumbs, even from 20 years ago. This wasn't about catching her in the act. It was about dissecting an entire ecosystem of lies that had flourished unseen beneath our very roof. What other connections lay hidden within that past? What kind of twisted roots had taken hold without my knowledge? The game, it seemed, had just begun, and I was holding a powerful, unexpected hand. The hum of my workstation at 3 a.m. was a comforting, familiar sound, a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in my gut. My world was no longer just blueprints. It was now a labyrinth of data. The keys beneath my fingertips felt like extensions of my will, each click a step deeper into the past. I started methodically, the way I always tackled complex problems. Public records, news archives first. The crash was big news back then, a local tragedy. I pulled up old digital scans of newspaper clippings, grainy photos of twisted metal and emergency lights. The smell of stale coffee from my thermos was the only companion in the quiet house as I pieced together the fragments. The reports were consistent. Multi-vehicle pileup on I-81. 2 fatalities confirmed at the scene, Mark Sullivan among them. Cause, suspected brake failure on a semi-truck. Case closed, or so it seemed. But my architects, I noticed the gaps, the subtly omitted details. No names of the responding paramedics, no specific hospital mention for body transport, just a vague reference to local authorities. Didn't strike me as odd at the time, but now it screamed. Why the lack of detail for a major fatal accident? Was it incompetence, or something more deliberate? My own memories of the period were tinged with a haze of early romance with Emily, a blinding light that had perhaps overshadowed the grim shadows around her. Then, the first unsettling thread. Deep in a cached version of an old county coroner's report site, an accidental digital echo from a forgotten server, I found it. A preliminary, unconfirmed report. It listed Mark Sullivan as transported alive, critical condition, trauma unit, to a private, lesser-known hospital 20 miles outside the city, a facility I barely heard of, one specializing in complex neurological cases. Transported alive. The words were a punch to the gut. All official records said, fatality at scene. This was a glitch in the matrix, a discordant note in a symphony of lies. Why had this detail vanished? Who had the power to make such a critical piece of information disappear from every public record? The glow of the screen reflected in my eyes, a cold, hard truth. My mind raced, connecting dots that shouldn't connect. A forgotten hospital, a critical condition report that was swiftly buried. Was this a genuine medical error, a mix-up in the chaos of a major accident? Or was it a deliberate erasure, a meticulous scrubbing of records? The smell of ozone from my humming computer seemed to thicken the air around me, a silent witness to the unraveling. This wasn't just about Emily and an old flame. This was about something bigger, a systemic manipulation. The question wasn't just if Mark was alive, but why his survival was suppressed. And who benefited? Did my wife know this? Or was she merely a pawn in a larger, more intricate game of shadows? My revenge, I realized, wouldn't just be directed at her betrayal. It would have to encompass the puppet masters pulling the strings behind the curtain. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky with a pale, cold light, and I hadn't even scratched the surface. The sunrise, usually a welcome promise of a new day, now felt like a spotlight on my unfolding nightmare. My mouth was dry, tasting of old coffee and fear. Emily slept soundly in the next room, oblivious, or perhaps perfectly aware. The faint scent of her perfume, usually comforting, now seemed to mock me from the bed, a lingering ghost of a life that was proving to be a cleverly constructed illusion. The fan of my laptop whirred, warm air blowing onto my face, a stark reminder of the cold data on the screen. Transported alive, critical condition, trauma unit. The words were etched into my mind. This wasn't just a love triangle. This was a conspiracy, a professional-grade cover-up. My next move was obvious. Dig into that private hospital. St. Jude's Rehabilitation and Wellness. The old report had vaguely stated. No public listing for such a place now. Convenient, wasn't it? It reeked of a shell game. I leveraged a few contacts, the kind you cultivate over years in the cutthroat world of corporate architecture. The ex-lawyer who now specialized in offshore finances. The IT wizard who'd once helped me trace a contractor's hidden assets. These weren't friends. They were transactional relationships, built on mutual benefit and a healthy dose of discretion. The kind of people who asked no questions as long as the payment was wired. I need deep dive intel on a defunct medical facility. I typed into an encrypted chat. Any records of ownership changes, strange patient transfers, anything irregular from the past 2 decades. The silence from my contacts wasn't unusual, but the eventual trickle of information was disturbing. St. Jude's had a peculiar history. It had been founded by a seemingly benevolent but notoriously private trust, the Evergreen Philanthropic Foundation, which itself was merely a subsidiary of a sprawling, almost untraceable conglomerate called Ethel Corp. Ethel Corp. The name resonated. They were a ghost in the corporate world, an entity whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to dabble in everything from biotech to specialized legal services, always just on the edge of legality, never quite crossing the line. Their tentacles, it seemed, reached everywhere, even into my carefully insulated life. What kind of organization would be interested in disappearing a man after a car accident? Was this a medical experiment gone sideways? Or something far more sinister, connected to his prior life, his family? Something Emily had deliberately hidden? Then, the plot twist, delivered via a series of encrypted files from my IT contact. In the year following Mark Sullivan's supposed death, St. Jude had received a massive, untraceable donation of over $50 million, and not from the philanthropic foundation, but from a separate, anonymous offshore account linked, bafflingly, to a subsidiary of Phoenix Innovations, a cutting-edge AI research firm currently making waves with its neural network advancements. Phoenix Innovations, of all companies. They were miles away from medical rehabilitation, yet they funneled millions into a vanishing hospital, precisely when Mark disappeared. The sheer audacity of it left me cold. This wasn't just a hospital. It was a vault, hiding a secret so profound it required a fortune to bury. The threads were growing tighter, connecting disparate elements into a grim tapestry. My initial goal of elegant revenge for betrayal seemed almost quaint in comparison to the complex web of power and deception I was uncovering. How far up did this go? And what was Mark's true role in this dark drama? The digital breadcrumbs were leading me down a very dark rabbit hole, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the true masterminds were still hiding in the shadows. The name Phoenix Innovations echoed in my mind, a discordant note in the symphony of deception. An AI research firm funding a defunct neurological rehab hospital? The connection was tenuous, yet undeniably there. My contact had also unearthed something else, a series of patents filed by Phoenix Innovations in the last 5 years, all related to advanced neural interface technology and rapid cognitive rehabilitation. Was Mark Sullivan, the man who supposedly died, now a subject, or perhaps even a key player, in their cutting-edge, ethically ambiguous research? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, colder than any winter wind. It felt like stepping into a sci-fi movie, but the stakes were terrifyingly real. I needed to get closer to Phoenix Innovations, to understand their inner workings. And the perfect conduit, the unwitting pawn, was right under my nose. Emily. She had been acting strangely, yes, but also increasingly preoccupied with her new wellness retreat. A vague, expensive program she'd recently enrolled in, claiming it was for stress management. A program, I now realized, that sounded suspiciously like a front for something far more sinister. I remembered her mentioning a guru in passing, someone who emphasized reprogramming negative thought patterns. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Was this retreat connected to Phoenix, a way to test their neural tech, or perhaps even to subtly manipulate individuals for their own ends? The very idea was chilling. My plan began to crystallize, a cold, calculated strategy. I wouldn't confront Emily directly. Instead, I would use her new retreat as a Trojan horse. I'd pretend to be supportive, even express interest in joining her. She'd been subtly pushing me to try it anyway, citing my own stress levels. It was a perfect cover. I could observe, gather intelligence, and perhaps even find a way to access their systems from the inside. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing a dangerous, potentially illegal operation. The moral dilemma gnawed at me. Was I justified in invading her privacy, in manipulating her, even if it was to uncover a larger truth that implicated her? The answer, for now, was a resounding yes. They had shattered my life. I would shatter their carefully constructed facade. The next morning, over breakfast, I put on my best performance. "Honey," I began, my voice calm, almost casual. "You seem so much more relaxed since you started that wellness program. I've been thinking, maybe I should give it a try too. You know, with all the recent project deadlines, I could use some reprogramming myself." Her eyes, which had been distant and guarded, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of surprise and a slow, almost imperceptible smile. "Really, darling? I'd love that," she said, her voice a little too eager, a little too pleased. The scent of her expensive vanilla perfume, usually a comfort, now felt like a sweet, deceptive poison in the air. She pulled out her phone, immediately navigating to the retreat's website, showing me the testimonials, the serene images of people meditating in lush gardens. It all looked so innocuous, so benign. But I saw the subtle hints, the coded language, cognitive recalibration, neural pathways to success, unlocking your true potential. Buzzwords that screamed AI manipulation to my trained ear. The website also listed the retreat's primary sponsor, a wellness innovation fund that, with a quick mental cross-reference, I recognized as another subsidiary of Ethel Corp. The web was tightening, and Emily, my wife, was unknowingly leading me directly into its center. A chill ran down my spine, a cold premonition of the dangers ahead. But I was ready. The architect was about to dismantle their entire structure, piece by painful piece. The wellness retreat was everything the brochure promised, and nothing I expected. Nestled in a secluded valley, it was all manicured lawns, minimalist architecture, and an unsettling quiet. The air itself seemed to hum with an artificial serenity, a faint, almost imperceptible antiseptic scent mingling with expensive essential oils. Too perfect. This wasn't a place of natural calm. It was a meticulously constructed stage. Emily, surprisingly chipper, guided me through the check-in, her enthusiasm radiating, a stark contrast to my internal dread. She genuinely believed this was helping her. What a bummer. Our days quickly settled into a routine of forced relaxation. Early morning mindfulness sessions, bland organic meals, and personal growth workshops led by remarkably charismatic, yet unsettlingly bland facilitators. They all had that same unnervingly calm demeanor, their eyes holding a distant, almost vacant quality. It was like watching highly trained actors perform a synchronized play. I observed a silent predator in a field of sheep. The other participants, mostly well-heeled, middle-aged individuals, seemed to float through the days in a haze of blissful compliance, their faces devoid of genuine emotion, simply reflecting the program positivity. It smelled like psychological manipulation, refined to an art form. My gut clenched during one of the digital detox periods. While everyone was encouraged to surrender their devices, I noticed a subtle hum. It wasn't the ambient noise of a large facility. It was a specific frequency, almost imperceptible, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards during certain meditation exercises. Could it be some form of subliminal auditory influence? Or was it something more technical, a hidden network, a constant data stream? My architects, I picked out anomalies. Small, strategically placed vents in the walls of the common areas. Too many discreetly placed cameras disguised as light fixtures. This wasn't retreat. It was a glorified observation lab. The thought made the hairs on my arms prickle. Then, the plot twist. During the group sharing circle, the lead facilitator, a man named Dr. Alastair Thorne, took center stage. He was effortlessly charming, his voice a soothing balm, his eyes intensely focused on each participant. As he spoke about recalibrating neural pathways, a jolt went through me. I recognized him, not from any public profile, but from the periphery of an old, internal corporate dossier from my past research into Ethel Corporation. Thorne wasn't just a wellness guru. He was listed as a consulting neurolinguistic programmer who had done clandestine work for Ethel Corp's Human Capital Optimization division years ago. The pieces slammed together. This wasn't about Emily's personal growth. It was about control, about accessing and manipulating the very thoughts of their clients. What were they really doing to these people? And what did it have to do with Mark Sullivan? The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Emily wasn't just unfaithful. She was ensnared, a participant in a larger, sinister experiment. My vengeful gaze shifted from her to the architects of this psychological prison. The moral dilemma intensified. Was I rescuing her, or merely using her as a means to dismantle their operation? Did I even have a choice? As I watched Thorne's hypnotic gaze sweep over the room, I noticed something else, a small detail that sent a cold wave of dread through me. On his wrist, partially obscured by a sleeve, was a watch. Not just any watch. It was a vintage piece, a rare model from the 1990s, almost identical to one I remember Mark Sullivan always wearing, a distinctive family heirloom. Coincidence? Or was Mark not just alive, but here, among them, perhaps even part of this insidious operation, or its ultimate victim? The gilded cage had just revealed a much darker secret. Thorne's watch, a glint of polished steel, was a shard of ice in my gut. That distinctive model, a vintage Omega, was almost identical to the one Mark Sullivan had worn, an heirloom from his grandfather. So unique you'd never forget it. Coincidence? Screw that. I'd stopped believing in coincidence the moment I found that locket. The artificial calm of the retreat suddenly felt like a suffocating blanket, and the subtle hum of the hidden tech now resonated with a sinister undertone, a constant reminder of unseen eyes. Was I being watched, evaluated, even now? My analytical mind, usually so precise, was now wired with a frantic energy. If Thorne had Mark's watch, what did that truly mean? Was Mark alive and complicit in this elaborate deception, perhaps working with Thorne? Or was he a prisoner, a test subject, his identity stripped away, and his will subjugated by Phoenix Innovations and Neurotech? The implications were staggering, twisting my concept of betrayal into something far more grotesque. Emily's infidelity was a mere scratch compared to the gaping wound of this larger conspiracy. I began to shift my focus from mere observation to active information gathering within the retreat itself. The meditation rooms, particularly, felt like the nexus of their operations. During these sessions, the low hum intensified, accompanied by soft, subliminal tones that were supposed to induce relaxation, but instead felt eerily invasive. I noticed a slight tremor in Emily's hand during these moments, a subconscious resistance, perhaps, to whatever they were implanting. Was it true serenity or was it compliance? And what was the line between therapeutic suggestion and outright mind control? The thought sent a chill straight through me. My chance came during a mandatory communal journaling session. Thorne left his tablet unattended on his desk for a mere 2 minutes, distracted by a newly arrived participant. My fingers, accustomed to precision, moved with practiced speed. It was a risky move, but one I had to take. The device was password protected, naturally, but my years of architecting secure systems had also taught me how to find the back doors, the subtle vulnerabilities that even the most confident tech gurus overlooked. A quick, almost imperceptible keystroke sequence, a trick I'd learned from that IT wizard, and the screen flickered open. The smell of the paper in my own journal, supposedly for reflection, felt like ash in my mouth as my eyes scanned Thorne's open files. What I saw was what I expected. Not financial ledgers or corporate secrets, but detailed, granular neural activity graphs from dozens of individuals, identified not by name, but by alphanumeric codes. And then a single recent file highlighted in red, subject 7M, post-cognitive recalibration baseline. Note, unstable behavioral adherence. Requires further reinforcement. Attached to this file was a small, high-resolution photo. It was a recent image, taken discreetly. The face, older, gaunter, with a faint, almost imperceptible scar above his left eyebrow, was undeniably Mark Sullivan. He was alive, but his eyes were vacant, empty, staring straight ahead as if seeing nothing. Thorne wasn't just a consultant. He was a puppet master, and Mark Sullivan was his most disturbing puppet. The implications of unstable behavioral adherence and reinforcement sent a cold dread through my entire being. My revenge, whatever form it took, would not only involve dismantling this operation, but somehow, almost impossibly, finding a way to restore the man whose life they had apparently stolen. The photo of Mark, hollow-eyed and lifeless, burned itself into my memory. This wasn't just physical survival. It was a perversion of life, unstable behavioral adherence. They weren't just treating him. They were reprogramming him. The chilling reality hit me. The car accident, the missing records, the private hospital, the massive donations to Ethel Corp, and now this wellness retreat were all pieces of an elaborate, decades-long project. Mark Sullivan wasn't just Emily's ex-boyfriend. He was Phoenix Innovations' magnum opus, their most complex and disturbing experiment. The scent of sterile air and chemical cleaners that permeated the retreat now felt like the very smell of a laboratory, a place where humanity was dissected and reassembled. My objective shifted from simple revenge to something far more complex, exposure and, somehow, liberation. But how do you liberate someone who might not even know they're a prisoner? And how do you fight an entity as powerful and shadowy as Ethel Corp, an organization that can make a living man disappear for 20 years? It was like trying to dismantle a skyscraper with a screwdriver, piece by careful, excruciating piece. The moral dilemma loomed larger than ever. Was I playing God, inserting myself into a situation I barely understood, potentially destroying lives, even Emily's in the process? Or was I simply trying to rectify a profound injustice? I needed to understand the recalibration process, the technology, the exact nature of their control. I subtly altered my own journaling habits, leaving specific phrases or questions in my notes that would act as digital breadcrumbs, hoping to bait Thorne into engaging with me on a deeper, more technical level. I also began to surreptitiously scan the retreat's internal Wi-Fi network for vulnerabilities, looking for any open port, any unencrypted data stream. The security was tight, as expected from an Ethel Corp subsidiary, but no system was truly unhackable. There was always a back door, always a forgotten key. One evening, during a mandatory mind-body harmonization session led by Thorne, he demonstrated a new biofeedback device. It was a sleek, unassuming headset that connected wirelessly to individual tablets, supposedly monitoring brainwaves for optimal relaxation. But as he demonstrated on a compliant participant, I noticed a subtle, almost imperceptible flicker on his own tablet screen. Not just brainwave patterns, but a rapidly updating stream of emotional and cognitive markers. Joy, anger, focus, distraction, all quantified, all being fed into an algorithm. And then, for a split second, I saw a familiar code flash across the screen. Subject 7M. The air thickened, pressing down on me. Thorne wasn't just monitoring. He was mapping the human mind. The headset wasn't just biofeedback. It was a neural interface, collecting raw, unfiltered thought data. The cold, precise clicks of the device in Thorne's hands echoed the methodical, terrifying precision of their operation. This was how they controlled Mark, how they recalibrated behavior. This was digital invasion on an unprecedented scale, harvesting the very essence of personality. And my wife, Emily, was willingly putting this device on her head every day. The realization was a punch to the gut. The retreat wasn't just manipulating minds. It was stealing identities bit by digital bit. The stakes had just escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just treating minds. They were stealing identities bit by digital bit. The neural headset, so innocuous in its design, was a digital leash, extracting raw cognitive data. Emily, my wife, was not just complicit in my betrayal, but a willing participant in her own and potentially Mark's psychological evisceration. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth, sharper than any emotion I'd felt before. The hum of the retreat's machinery, usually a subtle background noise, now resonated like a predator's growl, threatening to consume everything. My revenge had transformed. It wasn't about a spurned husband. It was about exposing a monumental crime against humanity, a chilling glimpse into a future where free will was just another data point to be harvested. I needed to infiltrate their core system, to download irrefutable proof, a digital indictment that would shatter Ethel Corp's meticulously crafted facade. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about precision, about striking at the central nervous system of their operation. I needed to extract the truth, then vanish, preparing my payload for a public launch that would leave no doubt. I spent the next 2 days like a ghost, moving through the retreat's forced serenity, appearing compliant, yet planning my every move. I noticed the staff's constant surveillance, the way they subtly guided conversations, the almost imperceptible changes in other participants' demeanors after intensive recalibration sessions. They seemed lighter, yes, but also flatter, as if parts of their personalities had been meticulously sanded down. It was profoundly unsettling. What was the end game here? Beyond mere corporate espionage or political influence, were they creating a new breed of controllable citizen? The idea was almost too dark to contemplate. My opportunity finally came during a mandatory communal reflection night, where all participants were encouraged to use their headsets for an extended period, entering a deep, guided trance. Thorne and his core team would be in the control room, monitoring hundreds of neural streams. Perfect. While Emily, headset on, sat in a quiet corner, lost in her induced bliss. I slipped away. I knew where the server room was. My architects, I had identified the subtle structural cues during a nature walk near the facility's secluded power annex. The plot twist slammed into me the moment I breached their primary data server. It wasn't just Mark's file, or even dozens of other anonymized subjects. I found entire folders filled with detailed neural profiles of prominent politicians, influential CEOs, and even high-ranking military officials, all coded, all with recalibration notes. This wasn't just a wellness scam. It was a highly sophisticated, multi-decade operation to create a network of controlled assets at the highest echelons of power. And then I found Emily's file. Her infidelity wasn't organic. Thorne had been actively manipulating her, using tailored psychological triggers to encourage her liaison, specifically with the intent to draw me into retreat, leveraging my reputation as a systems architect. They didn't want my mind for recalibration. They wanted my skills for their next, more ambitious phase of control. My betrayal was merely a meticulously crafted bait. The sheer audacity of it left me cold, colder than the server room's air. The moral dilemma vanished. This isn't personal anymore. It was war. I furiously copied data, gigabytes of it, onto an encrypted drive. Every keystroke a silent declaration of defiance. My fingers flew, bypassing their firewalls, pulling their secrets into the light. But as the progress bar crept towards completion, a red warning light flared above the server rack. An intrusion alert. My window of opportunity was closing, fast. I heard footsteps approaching outside the reinforced door. The faint scent of ozone now mixed with the acrid tang of rising panic. I had the evidence, but escaping with it, and perhaps even saving Emily and Mark, was now a race against time, with my own life hanging in the balance. The click of the server door's lock, an ominous echo in the silent hall, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. Footsteps, fast, purposeful, heading straight for my position. I ripped the encrypted drive from the port just as the red intrusion light pulsed erratically, painting the server racks in a demonic glow. This was it, the culmination of weeks of calculated risk. The scent of ozone, thick and metallic, filled my nostrils, a tangible taste of impending danger. My architectural background wasn't just about buildings. It was about understanding flow, egress, hidden passages. I'd noticed a discrete utility access panel behind a fake wall near the emergency power conduit earlier that day. A long shot, but my only shot. With a surge of desperate energy, I yanked the panel open, revealing a cramped, dusty service tunnel. No time for elegance. I squeezed through just as the server room door burst open, a sliver of light illuminating the desperate scramble as I pulled the panel shut behind me, plunging the tunnel into darkness. I heard Thorne's cold, furious voice, sharp and cutting, barking orders. He's got the data. Find him. Cramped, dusty, and smelling of stale concrete, the tunnel was a lifeline. I crawled, my body screaming in protest, the encrypted drive clutched tight in my hand. They would tear the retreat apart to find me. But I was already gone, a ghost disappearing into the shadows. My elegant revenge wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation. It would be a slow, methodical dismantling, a public vivisection of their monstrous operation. The evidence on this drive was a bomb, ticking down to the absolute destruction of Thorne, Phoenix Innovations, and the untouchable Ethel Corp. What was the true cost of their control? They were about to find out. My mind raced, already building the next phase. Social media, investigative journalists, a carefully orchestrated digital campaign that would leverage AI-generated deepfakes of Thorne's lectures spliced with the cold, hard data of his victims. I'd use their own tools against them. I'd expose the neural harvesting, the identity theft, the political manipulation, the 20-year lie that had stolen Mark Sullivan's life and ensnared my wife. Emily's betrayal was merely a tool, a sophisticated lure to draw me into their web. Thorne hadn't just used her, he'd orchestrated her. The moral dilemma of striking back no longer existed. They had not merely disrupted my life. They had tried to weaponize it. Hours later, long after the search dogs had given up and the sounds of distant sirens faded, I emerged from a storm-drained miles in retreat, covered in grime but alive. The night air was crisp, clean, and impossibly quiet compared to controlled chaos I'd left behind. My phone, long dead, was useless. I needed to reconnect, to execute. The fight was far from over. I wouldn't seek physical retribution. Their careers, their reputations, their financial empires. Those were the true targets. Psychological ruin, social ostracization, financial collapse. That was the architect's revenge. I walked toward the distant glow of city lights, the encrypted drive a solid weight in my pocket, the true locket of this twisted tale. What kind of future awaits a world where identities can be stolen and minds reprogrammed by the powerful? And how much does one man owe to rectify a truth that was buried for decades? I didn't have all the answers, not yet, but I had the data. And the game for Ethel Corp had just gone from chess to thermonuclear war. And I was holding the launch codes.